The billionaire CEO dropped to his knees on Christmas morning and sobbed like a broken man. His 13-year-old children, the triplets he'd abandoned before they were born, had just handed him a gift. Inside the frame, their childhood achievements he'd never witnessed. Basketball medals, poetry awards, paintings, and carved into the wood, "You missed our Decembers, but you came back to build our tomorrows." 3 weeks ago, he'd shown up begging for a chance. Their mother Rita had every reason to slam the door in his face. But what nobody knew, yet what the kids didn't know, what Rita had just discovered, was why he really left. And it wasn't what any of them thought. Rita Daly had stopped expecting miracles the winter she turned 31 and gave birth alone. 13 Decembers later, she'd stopped expecting much of anything, except the envelope. Pay attention to this detail, because what happens when it doesn't arrive changes everything. It came the same week, every year. Tucked between utility bills and holiday catalogs, the paper so crisp, it felt expensive just to touch. No return address, no note, just a check with too many zeros, and a name printed at the bottom in cold corporate font, John Fuller. This year, on December 4th, Rita walked to the mailbox at sunset with Kane's basketball jersey draped over her shoulder and Russell's geometry homework crumpled in her coat pocket. Elvira was inside painting something she wouldn't let anyone see yet. The snow had started early this year, soft flakes catching in Rita's hair, the kind of first snow that used to make her believe in fresh starts. She pulled open the mailbox door. Credit card offer, grocery flyer, electric bill, no envelope. Rita's hands paused mid-reach. Her fingers went cold, not from the December wind, but from something deeper. Something that tasted like dread. She pulled everything out again, shuffling through each piece with hands that had suddenly started trembling. She checked the ground around the mailbox. She looked inside again, reaching all the way to the back corner where mail sometimes stuck. Nothing. Here's what you need to understand. For 13 years, 156 months, the check had arrived within the same 3-day window. It was the one thing about John Fuller she could count on. His consistency in staying away. His reliability in reducing fatherhood to a bank transfer. And now, it wasn't there. This should feel like freedom, right? Like finally being released from the monthly reminder that her children's father had chosen silence over them. But it didn't. Instead, dread settled in her stomach like a stone, whispering that something had shifted in a world she'd carefully built to run without him. She walked back toward the house, each step crunching through fresh snow that was already covering her footprints, erasing evidence she'd been there at all. The porch lights were on. Through the window, she could see Kane in the kitchen, probably raiding the fridge before dinner. Russell's bedroom light glowed upstairs. He'd be at his desk, writing in that journal he thought no one knew about. Elvira's shadow moved across the living room wall, her paintbrush making slow, deliberate strokes against canvas. Her children, 13 years old this past October. Growing so fast, Rita sometimes felt like she was watching time-lapse footage of flowers blooming, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. They'd built this life together, the four of them. They had routines, inside jokes, their own language of glances across dinner tables. Kane's terrible puns that made Russell groan and Elvira hide her smile. Russell's poetry that he only read aloud when he thought everyone was asleep. Elvira's art plastered across every wall, transforming their modest home into a gallery of her growing mind. They didn't need John Fuller. They never had. So why did the missing envelope feel like a warning? Rita climbed the porch steps, shaking snow from her coat. She reached for the door handle and froze. Someone was standing at the far end of the porch. A man. Tall. Expensive coat dusted with snow. Dark hair going gray at the temples. Face she hadn't seen in person for 13 years, but had memorized anyway from magazine covers and business articles that occasionally appeared when she was stupid enough to search his name at 2 a.m. Now here's where everything changes. Watch what happens next. John Fuller stood 10 feet away, hands shaking at his sides, not the confident billionaire from Forbes covers, but something broken and desperate. He looked thinner than his photos. Older. His eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, the kind of eyes that came from crying alone in dark rooms where no one could hear. His whole body seemed to be trembling not from cold, but from something that lived deeper. Something that had been buried for 13 years and was finally clawing its way to the surface. When he spoke, his voice cracked on the first word, like ice splitting. Rita. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the impossible physics of him being here, standing on her porch, existing in 3 dimensions, instead of just as a name on a check she'd learned to expect and resent in equal measure. "Please," he whispered, and the word sounded like it was breaking him from the inside out. "I need to meet my children." Behind her, the front door opened. Kane appeared first, basketball still tucked under one arm, face shifting from curiosity to confusion. His eyes went wide. Russell emerged next, alerted by the cold air rushing in and the tension that had suddenly filled the December night. And then Elvira, still holding her paintbrush, paint-stained fingers frozen mid-gesture, her expression unreadable in that way she had of studying things like they were puzzles she was already solving in her head. All 3 of them stared at the stranger on their porch. The stranger who had their jawline, their dark eyes, their exact shade of hair, their everything. Kane spoke first, his voice harder than any 13-year-old should be, edged with something that sounded like protection and fury mixed together. "Who are you?" John's face did something complicated, hope and grief colliding so violently, Rita almost felt sorry for him. Almost. His voice failed completely. He tried again, forcing words through a throat that seemed to be closing. "I'm John." Kane's expression didn't change, his jaw set exactly the way John's did when he was angry. "John who?" Rita watched something inside John Fuller fracture, in real time. "I'm your father," he managed, and the words came out so quietly they almost disappeared into the snow falling around them. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight, the kind that pressed against eardrums and made the air feel too thick to breathe, the kind that meant everything was about to change. Russell took a step back into the house, face draining of color. Elvira's grip tightened on her paintbrush until her knuckles went white. Kane's jaw clenched in a way that made him look suddenly, devastatingly older, like he'd aged 5 years in 5 seconds. "Get inside," Rita told her children, finding her voice buried under 13 years of anger. Now, Kane didn't move. "Mom, inside, I'll handle this." She waited until all 3 had retreated into the house, watching through the window with faces pressed against the glass, breath fogging the pain. Then she stepped off the porch, putting her body between John and her front door, between this ghost from her past and the future she'd built without him. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steady, cold as the December air. John looked like he'd been asked to explain quantum physics in a language he didn't speak. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. His hands were still shaking, visible tremors he couldn't control. "I had to come. I couldn't." He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes, like he could push the emotion back inside. "I'm sorry. I know I have no right. I know that. But I need," his voice cracked again, "I need to know them, please." "You need?" Rita felt something hot and sharp rising in her chest, 13 years of exhaustion and rage finally finding its voice. "You've needed nothing for 13 years. You've wanted nothing except to pretend we didn't exist outside of a monthly payment schedule. That's not true. Don't." The word came out like a blade. "Don't you dare stand here and tell me what's true. You left. You signed the papers. You took your company and your ambition and your fear. And you left. I thought you didn't want me involved." The words tumbled out desperate, clumsy. I told you I was pregnant, John. I told you I wanted to keep the babies, and you said you weren't ready. You said you had too much at stake. You said," her voice caught. She steadied it with everything she had. "You said you'd support us financially, but you couldn't be a father." Those were your words, not mine. John's face drained of color. "That's not how I remember." "Then your memory is convenient." They stood in the snow, years of silence finally breaking open between them like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Through the window, Rita could see 3 shadows watching her children, their faces pressed against the glass, trying to understand why the ghost they'd learned to live without had suddenly become real. But what John says next, pay attention to this because it's important, reveals something Rita never expected. "Please," John said again, and this time the word came out broken beyond repair. "Just let me explain. Let me try to what? Fix 13 years in one conversation? Make up for every birthday you missed, every school play you didn't attend, every nightmare you weren't there to chase away?" Rita's hands were shaking now too, but not from cold. from fury that had been building for over a decade. They built their lives without you. They're happy. They're whole. They don't need you to show up and press us. I almost died. The words stopped her cold. John was crying now, tears running down his face unchecked, freezing on his cheeks. 6 weeks ago, I collapsed in my apartment. Heart, stress, I don't even know. I was alone. Completely alone. And lying there on the floor waiting for the ambulance, I realized. His voice broke entirely. Nobody knows me. Nobody really knows me. And if I died right then, who would remember me? Who would care? Rita's chest felt too tight. Not my board. Not the investors. Not the people who shake my hand at galas and forget my name by morning. He looked at her with eyes that had gone raw, and I thought about them. My children. 3 people in this world who share my blood, my face, He stopped, breathing hard. And they don't even know me. They'll grow up thinking I didn't want them. That I chose my company over them. That I didn't care. You didn't care. I was terrified. The confession came out ragged. I was 26 years old, building something from nothing, working 20-hour days, drowning in debt and panic attacks and fear that it would all collapse. And you told me you were pregnant, and he shook his head. I broke, I ran. I convinced myself you were better off without me, that they would be better off without me. I convinced myself that money was enough, that providing was the same as being present. Rita felt her anger wavering. She grabbed it back, held it close like armor she couldn't afford to lose. Those are explanations, not excuses. I know. You don't get to show up now and expect. I don't expect anything. John took a shaky breath. I just need the chance to know them. Even if they hate me. Even if you hate me. I need to try. Please, Rita, I'm begging you. Through the window, Kane was still watching. Russell had disappeared, probably to his room to process alone, like he always did. Elvira remained, paintbrush lowered now, her face pressed close to the glass, studying this man who was half of her DNA but none of her history. And here's what you need to ask yourself, because this is the question that will haunt Rita for weeks. Can someone who abandoned you really change? Or are they just saying what you want to hear? Rita thought about the box in her closet, the one she'd never opened but never thrown away. Letters she'd written every December. Angry ones. Sad ones. Desperate ones addressed to John and never sent. 13 years of words she'd poured onto paper instead of into phone calls that never came. She thought about the youth center where she worked, the grant that had saved them 5 years ago, the anonymous donation that kept them running. She'd never questioned where the money came from. She looked at the man on her porch, billionaire, ghost, the father her children had learned to live without, and made a decision that would change everything. You can't just walk back into their lives because you finally feel guilty. I know. They don't know you. They don't trust you. They have every reason to hate you. I know. If you hurt them, if you disappear again, I will destroy you. The threat came out quiet and absolute. I don't care how much money you have, or how powerful you are. I will make you wish you'd stayed away. John nodded, tears still streaming. I understand. Rita looked back at her house. At the 3 faces watching from the window, 2 now, Russell still hiding. At the life she'd built from the rubble he'd left behind. Come back tomorrow, 4 o'clock, we'll talk. Just talk. She turned to go, then stopped. And John? If you ever call yourself their father again before you've earned that title, this conversation ends, permanently. She walked back to her house, leaving him standing in the snow, shoulders shaking with the weight of everything he'd lost. Behind her, she heard him whisper, "Thank you." Rita didn't look back. She opened her door and stepped inside, where 3 pairs of eyes were waiting wide, confused, frightened, curious, angry, all at once. Kane spoke first, his voice cracking in a way it hadn't in months, caught between boy and man, between hope and betrayal. Was that really him? Rita looked at her son, at Russell, who'd reappeared on the stairs, face blotchy from crying, at Elvira, who was studying her with that unnerving calm she'd inherited from the man currently standing alone in their yard. Yes, Rita said quietly, that was your father. And outside, through the window, they watched John Fuller walk slowly to his car, shoulders shaking with sobs that had waited 13 years to finally break free. If you've ever felt invisible to someone who should have seen you, if you've ever wondered what was wrong with you that made someone choose to leave, you're not alone in this. Hit that subscribe button, because stories like Rita's, and her children's, deserve to be heard. And what happens next? It gets even more complicated. The silence inside the house felt like something alive and dangerous. Rita closed the door and leaned against it, heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Three faces stared at her, Kane's jaw set hard, Russell's eyes already wet, Elvira's expression unreadable as always. Through the window, taillights disappeared down the street. John Fuller was gone, for now. But here's what none of them realized yet. He wasn't the same man who left 13 years ago, and that would make everything so much harder. Mom! Kane's voice came out strangled. What just happened? Rita opened her mouth, closed it. Every word she'd rehearsed in her head, over 13 years, every explanation she'd prepared for the day her children finally asked about their father dissolved like snow on warm pavement. He wants to meet you, she said finally. Simply. Kane's face twisted. Now? After 13 years of nothing? He wants to meet us now? Kane. No. He threw his basketball against the wall hard enough to leave a mark. The kind of angry gesture Rita knew came from hurt too big for a 13-year-old body to contain. He doesn't get to just show up. He doesn't get to. His voice cracked. He was 13, still caught between boy and man. And the anger pouring out of him sounded too old for his body. We don't need him, I know. Then why did you let him stay? Why didn't you tell him to leave? Rita looked at her son. At the way his hands were shaking exactly like John's had. At the way his eyes were doing that thing they did when he was fighting tears he'd rather die than shed. Because, he asked. And because. She stopped, searching for truth that wouldn't sound like betrayal. Because you three deserve the chance to decide for yourselves. Russell made a sound from the stairs. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. Something caught between disbelief and pain. Decide what? His voice came out hollow. Whether we want a father who didn't want us? The words landed like stones thrown into still water, creating ripples that would spread for weeks. Elvira hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. She stood perfectly still, paintbrush still in her hand, blue paint slowly dripping onto the hardwood floor she'd been so careful to protect with newspapers earlier. Rita crossed to her, gently taking the brush before the paint ruined the floors she'd refinished herself 3 years ago. Ellie? He was crying. Elvira's voice was soft, clinical, like she was narrating a documentary about human behavior. Real crying, not the kind people do for cameras or sympathy, the kind that comes from somewhere that's been locked up too long, the kind that hurts to watch. Kane whirled on her. So what? He cried. That's supposed to make it okay? I didn't say okay. Elvira finally looked at her brother, meeting his anger with that unnerving calm. I said, real. I don't care if it's real. He left us. He left Mom, Russell corrected quietly from the stairs, voice barely above a whisper. We weren't even born yet. Same thing. Is it? Kane started to answer, then stopped. His face did something complicated, the same expression John's had done on the porch when he'd looked at his children for the first time. The same grief-hope collision that Rita suspected would become familiar in the weeks ahead. Rita saw it clearly now. The resemblance. The exact angle of the jaw. The way emotion moved across their features like weather systems. Sudden storms, followed by unexpected clearings. God, they looked like him. I told him to come back tomorrow, Rita said, interrupting the silence before it could calcify into something harder. At 4. We're going to talk. Just talk. What if we don't want to talk to him? Kane's voice had dropped lower, dangerous and defensive, a wounded animal protecting itself. Then you don't have to. But I need to hear what he has to say. And you three, she looked at each of them in turn. You deserve to hear it too, even if you hate what you hear, even if it changes nothing. Russell stood abruptly, his poetry journal clutched against his chest like armor against a world that had suddenly become more complicated. I can't do this right now. He disappeared upstairs, before anyone could respond, his door closing with careful control, not a slam, but something worse. The quiet sound of someone trying not to break. Kane picked up his basketball, jaw working. This is so messed up. I know. He thinks he can just... I know, baby. Don't call me that. But his voice cracked again, betraying him, revealing the scared 13-year-old underneath the tough exterior. Rita pulled him into a hug he pretended he didn't need while clinging to her like he was drowning. Over his shoulder, She watched Elvira studying them both, that unnerving, artistic gaze that saw too much and revealed too little. The gaze that was already cataloging this moment for some future painting Rita would probably cry over. "What are you thinking, Ellie?" Her daughter tilted her head. "I'm thinking about the paintings I've seen of Greek tragedies. The ones where everyone's face is exactly the same expression, like pain, looks identical on every person." She paused, considering. "But it doesn't. His pain looked different than yours, different than Kane's, different than Russell's." "Why does that matter?" Kane pulled away from Rita, swiping at his eyes roughly. "Because," Elvira considered, choosing words carefully, "pain this specific usually has a story behind it, and I want to know what his story is." Kane looked at his sister like she'd betrayed him. Then he grabbed his basketball and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "Out. I need to shoot." He was gone before Rita could stop him, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the frame and shake the photos on the wall, years of family memories captured without John in any of them. Rita stood in the sudden quiet, Elvira beside her. Russell's footsteps audible, overhead pacing, in that way he did when words were building inside him that would eventually become poems. "You're angry at me for not sending him away," Rita said. "No." Elvira bent to clean up the paint that had dripped, movements, methodical and precise. "I'm trying to understand why you didn't. I don't know if I understand it myself. Did you see his hands?" The question caught Rita off guard. "What?" His hands were shaking, like he had Parkinson's or something. "But he doesn't, he's too young." It was fear. Elvira wiped paint from the floor with the kind of focus she usually reserved for her art. "I paint hands, a lot. They're harder than faces because they tell truths people don't mean to show." His hands were terrified. Rita felt something twist in her chest, something she didn't want to examine too closely. "Ellie, I'm not saying I forgive him. I'm just saying," she looked up, those dark eyes so much like John's, it hurt. "I'm saying I noticed." Upstairs, Russell's pacing stopped. The house fell into an uneasy stillness, the kind that came before storms or after earthquakes, when everything was waiting to see if the world would hold or crack completely. Rita moved to the window, looking out at the street where John's car had been. Snow was falling harder now, covering his footprints, erasing the evidence he'd been there at all. Except, he had been there. And tomorrow, he was coming back. She thought about the box in her closet. 13 letters. 13 Decembers of words she'd never sent. Anger and grief and exhaustion poured onto pages that John had never read. What would he think if he saw them? Would he understand what those years had cost her? "Mom," Elvira's voice pulled her back. "Yeah? When you looked at him when he was on the porch, what did you see?" Rita considered lying, considered saying she saw a stranger, a ghost, a man who meant nothing. Instead, she said, "I saw the person he was. Before everything broke. Do you think people can unbreak? I don't know. But you want to find out." Rita turned to face her daughter, this observant, unsettling, brilliant child who saw too much and understood things Rita wished she didn't have to. "I want you three to have the chance to find out. That's different." Elvira nodded slowly, accepting this distinction. Then she gathered her painting supplies, the moment of vulnerability, closing like a door. "I'm going to finish my piece. What are you painting?" Her daughter paused at the base of the stairs. "Faces in snow. I'm not sure whose yet." She disappeared upstairs, leaving Rita alone in the living room that suddenly felt too big and too small at once. Outside, she heard the rhythmic thump of Kane's basketball against concrete. The sound carried through the winter air, angry, desperate, trying to dribble away feelings that refused to disappear no matter how hard he threw the ball. Rita pulled out her phone, stared at the blank screen. There was a number she could call, the one listed on the checks, the one she'd never used in 13 years. Her fingers moved before her brain caught up, typing a message she wasn't sure she'd send. "The kids need time. Don't rush this. Don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect anything. Just come tomorrow, like I said. And John, if you disappear again after this, it will destroy them. Make sure you're ready for what you're asking." She stared at the words, then pressed send. 3 dots appeared immediately. He was typing, stopping, typing again. "Finally, I understand. I'll be there. And Rita, thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it." She didn't respond. Upstairs, Russell's door opened. She heard him walk to Kane's empty room, then to Elvira's. heard the murmur of their voices, the triplets conferring, processing, trying to make sense of the ghost who'd become suddenly, devastatingly real. Rita sank onto the couch, exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, John Fuller would return. And 13 years of silence would finally have to find its voice. Outside, Kane's basketball went silent. Through the window, Rita saw him standing in the driveway, snow falling around him like he was inside a snow globe, staring at the street where his father's car had been. Even from here, she could see his shoulders shaking. She should go to him, should say something that would make this easier. But what words existed for this? What comfort could touch the specific ache of learning your father was real and present, and desperately wanting in, after 13 years of being real and absent and deliberately staying out? The front door opened. Kane came in, snow dusted across his shoulders, eyes red but dry, the tears pushed back inside where he thought they belonged. "I'm okay," he said before she could ask. "Kane, I don't want to talk about it." He headed for the stairs, then stopped, turned back. His voice came out small and wounded. "And 13 years old. Mom? What if we meet him tomorrow and we like him?" The question hung there, raw and terrifying. "Then we figure that out together," Rita said quietly. "But what if liking him feels like betraying you? Like saying it was okay that he left?" "Baby," she caught herself. "Kane, letting him meet you isn't betraying anyone. Neither is being curious about him. Neither is wanting to know who he is. But what if?" His voice broke completely. "What if he leaves again?" And there it was, the real fear underneath all the anger, the wound beneath the wound. Rita stood, crossing to her son, pulling him close, even though he was nearly her height now. "Then we survive it, like we survived the first time, together." Kane nodded against her shoulder, then pulled away, wiping his eyes roughly. "This sucks." "Yeah, it really does." He disappeared upstairs, his footsteps heavy on each stair, the weight of sudden emotional complexity pressing down on someone who should still be worrying about basketball games and homework, not whether his father could be trusted. Rita stood alone again in the living room of the home she'd built without John Fuller. The home that suddenly felt like it was holding its breath, waiting to see if it would expand to fit 5 people or remain the fortress of 4 it had always been. Tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. And somewhere across town, in a penthouse apartment she'd never seen, John Fuller was probably sitting in the dark, staring at her text message, wondering if 13 years could ever be forgiven. Or if some distances, once traveled, could never truly be crossed again. John Fuller arrived at 3:47 p.m. Rita watched from the kitchen window as his black sedan pulled up, not the sleek sports car she'd imagined a billionaire would drive, but something modest, almost apologetic. Something that looked like he was trying not to intimidate with wealth. He sat in the driver's seat for a full 2 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, preparing himself for something that clearly terrified him more than any boardroom ever had. Remember this moment, it tells you everything about what's coming. When he finally emerged, he was wearing a suit. A full charcoal suit with a pressed white shirt and dark tie, like he was attending a board meeting instead of dinner with the children he'd abandoned. His arms were loaded with wrapped packages, too many, too expensive looking. The kind of gifts that screamed, "I don't know you, but I have money, and I'm desperate for you to like me." Rita felt her jaw tighten. He was trying, but he was trying all wrong. She opened the door before he could knock. His eyes met hers, nervous, exhausted, desperate, and something else. Something that looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, wondering if jumping would feel like flying or falling. "You're early." "I know, I'm sorry. He looked down at the packages, overflowing his arms. "I didn't know what they liked, so I brought options." Options, like children, were business proposals with multiple potential outcomes that could be tested and optimized. Rita stepped aside. "Come in." The house felt different with him in it. Smaller, like his presence took up oxygen that belonged to someone else. He stood in the entryway, overdressed and awkward, holding his expensive gifts, while Rita's home, modest, lived in, decorated with Elvira's art and Kane's sports trophies and Russell's bookshelf overflowing with worn poetry collections, announced everything about the life he'd missed. Every single thing he'd chosen not to be part of. "They're upstairs," Rita said. Getting ready. Ready. John repeated the word like it was foreign. Right. You can put those on the table. He moved to the dining table, the one Rita had found at a yard sale 8 years ago, and refinished herself, wood-stained with her sweat and determination. Set the packages down carefully, like they might explode if handled wrong. His hands were shaking again. Rita pulled a casserole from the oven. Nothing fancy. Chicken, vegetables, potatoes. The kind of meal she made every Tuesday. Because it was cheap and fed 4 people with leftovers for lunches. The kind of meal John probably hadn't eaten in a decade. Can I help? John asked. You can sit. He sat. The silence stretched like taffy being pulled too thin. Upstairs, Rita could hear the murmur of voices, the triplets having a final conference before descending into whatever this was about to become. Rita, don't. She set the casserole down harder than necessary, the dish clattering against the wood. Not yet. Let's just get through dinner. Footsteps on the stairs. Kane appeared first, wearing his basketball jersey, a deliberate choice, Rita knew. Armor disguised as casual wear. A statement, this is who I am without you. Russell followed, eyes fixed on the floor, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pockets like he could disappear into fabric if he tried hard enough. Elvira came last, moving with that unnerving calm. Wearing the paint-stained overalls she refused to throw away, despite Rita buying her new ones twice. All 3 stopped when they saw John. Stopped and stared like he was an exhibit in a museum they'd heard about but never expected to visit. John stood so fast his chair scraped across the floor with a sound that made everyone wince. Hi, his voice tangled over itself. You've gotten so big. Kane's expression went flat. We were babies when you left. Everything got bigger. The words hit like a slap. Right, of course. I just meant... John's hands fluttered uselessly at his sides. You all look incredible. Silence. Rita gestured to the table. Sit. Let's eat. They arranged themselves with military precision, Rita at the head, the triplets on one side, forming a united front, John isolated on the other. Like a negotiation table, like opposing counsel preparing for litigation, like a family that wasn't sure it wanted to be one. Rita served food. The scrape of utensils against plates sounded too loud, and the quiet every clink of fork on ceramic, amplified by tension. Kane broke first. So, he stabbed a potato with more force than necessary. Where have you been? John looked up from food he clearly had no intention of eating. I've been in the city, running my company. Fuller Innovations. Cool. What does Fuller Innovations do? We develop software solutions for ET10. I don't actually care. Kane's voice stayed level, but his knuckles were white around his fork, tendons standing out on his hand. I meant where have you been for 13 years, specifically. John's face went pale. I've been working, building the company. Did you know our birthdays? October. John's answer came quick, desperate to prove something. October 19th. What are our middle names? Silence. The kind of silence that has teeth. Kane smiled without warmth. That's what I thought. Kane, Rita's voice carried warning. What? He shows up after 13 years, and we're supposed to just pretend it's normal? Pretend he's earned the right to sit at our table? Kane's voice was rising despite his effort to control it. Pretend we haven't spent our entire lives wondering what we did wrong to make him not want us? Russell's fork clattered against his plate. John leaned forward, eyes wet. You're absolutely right. I haven't earned anything. But I'm here because I want to. Because I need to know you. All of you. Why now? Elvira spoke for the first time. Her voice clinical, the tone of a scientist examining a specimen. 13 years of nothing, then suddenly you need us. What changed? Here's where the story gets complicated. Pay close attention to what he says next. John's hands were shaking visibly now, tremors he couldn't hide even by gripping the edge of the table. I collapsed 6 weeks ago. Medical emergency. And lying there on the floor, I realized, his voice cracked like ice breaking. I've built an empire, made millions. And I was completely, utterly alone. No one who really knew me. No one who would miss me if I was gone. Boo-hoo. Kane's voice dripped acid. The billionaire is lonely. Kane, that's enough. No, Mom. He left you pregnant. Alone. Do you know what she went through? Kane turned to John, eyes blazing with fury that had been building for years. Do you have any idea what it's like watching your mother work double shifts, collapse on the couch at 9 p.m. barely able to keep her eyes open, wake up at 5 a.m. to do it again? She built this life. She raised us. You sent checks. John's face crumpled. I know. I'm so sorry. I thought. You thought what? That money fixed it? I thought that's what Rita wanted. I thought she didn't want me involved. The words landed like grenades. Rita felt the room tilt. What? The messages you sent, the voicemails, John looked genuinely confused, genuinely lost. I never received them. By the time I tried to reach you, you'd already filed separation papers. I thought you were cutting me out. That you decided I wasn't, his voice broke, that you didn't want me. Kane slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make dishes jump. That's a lie. Kane. He's lying, Mom. He has to be. Russell stood abruptly, chair scraping backwards with a screech. His eyes were wet, face flushed, breathing hard. I can't do this. He bolted from the table, footsteps pounding up the stairs like he was running from a fire. Rita felt rage and confusion warring in her chest, creating a storm she couldn't control. John, I called you. I left voicemails. I sent emails. I told you I was keeping the babies, and I needed. Her voice failed. You never responded. Not once. John's face showed something Rita hadn't expected. Genuine bewilderment. I never got them. His voice came out hollow, like the words were being pulled from somewhere deep and dark. Rita, I swear to you, I never. He stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes. The only message I got was from my lawyer. The separation papers, and a note saying you'd made your decision, that you wanted me to stay away. I never wrote that, but the papers had your signature. I signed papers agreeing to a financial arrangement, not telling you to disappear from our lives forever. They stared at each other across the table. 13 years of misunderstanding suddenly cracking open like a geode, revealing unexpected crystals inside. Kane's voice came out smaller, uncertain, the anger wavering. So, you thought she didn't want you? I thought. John's voice shook. I thought I was doing what she asked, providing support but staying out of your lives. I thought that's what she wanted, what was best. Elvira's eyes moved between her mother and John, processing, calculating, that brilliant mind working through possibilities. But you left. When she first told you she was pregnant, before any papers, you said you weren't ready. You said your company was too important. You said, I was terrified. The confession burst out of John like he'd been holding it underwater for 13 years. I was 26 years old, building something from nothing, working 20-hour days, drowning in debt and panic attacks and fear that it would all collapse. And you told me you were pregnant with triplets and He stopped, breathing hard. I panicked. I said things I didn't mean, things I've regretted every day since. I needed time to process, but I was going to come back. I was going to figure it out. And then his voice cracked. Then the papers came, and I thought you'd decided for me. Rita's mind raced. The papers, the lawyer, the way everything had happened so fast after John disappeared too fast, now that she thought about it. Something wasn't right about the timing. Kane's anger had shifted to confusion. So, this whole time, you thought we didn't want you? I thought your mother made the choice that was best for you. That I was. John's face twisted with pain. That I was the problem that needed removing. Elvira leaned forward, eyes sharp. Who delivered the separation papers? John looked at her. My business partner at the time, Kramer. He said he was helping me handle it so I could focus on the company during the crisis we were facing. Crisis? Rita's voice sharpened. The company was imploding. Investors pulling out. Creditors calling. Kramer was handling everything while I tried to save it. John stopped. Something dawning across his face. Something that looked like horror spreading in real time. The room went silent. You're going to want to remember this revelation. Kane's voice came out quiet. What? John stood slowly, hand over his mouth like he might be sick. Oh God, Kramer. His eyes went wide with realization. He handled all my communications that winter. Told me he was filtering out distractions so I could focus on saving the company. But if he was intercepting messages, Rita felt cold understanding spreading through her chest like ice water in her veins. He wanted your company, she whispered. John nodded slowly, face draining of all color. He tried to stage a takeover 3 months later. Tried to convince the board I was unstable, unfit to lead. I barely stopped it, barely kept control. I thought, his voice broke. I thought that was the worst he'd done. Elvira stood, moving to the window, processing. Kane sat frozen, fork still gripped in his hand like a weapon he'd forgotten he was holding. Upstairs, Russell's door was closed, but Rita knew he was listening, her sensitive son, who heard and felt everything. John sank back into his chair. I've spent 13 years thinking you chose this. That you wanted me gone. That cutting me out was your decision. I spent 13 years thinking you chose your company over us. They looked at each other, two people who'd built entire narratives from incomplete information. Two people who'd suffered from a betrayal neither of them had seen coming until it was too late. Kane's voice came out raw. So it was all a mistake? Not a mistake. John's voice hardened with something that looked like fury finally finding its target. A lie, a deliberate, calculated lie that cost us. He stopped, looking at the three children around the table. That cost us everything. Rita felt tears burning behind her eyes. 13 years. 13 years of single motherhood and exhaustion, and believing John hadn't cared. 13 years of anger at a man who thought he was respecting her wishes. What do you do when the person you've hated for over a decade turns out to be a victim too? I should go. John stood. Movements mechanical, robotic. This is too much. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Wait, Elvira's voice from the window stopped him. Everyone turned. She was still staring outside, into the gathering dark. I believe you. Kane's head snapped toward his sister. Ellie. I'm not saying it makes it okay. I'm just saying, she turned, fixing John with that unnerving gaze that seemed to see through skin and bone. When you said you never got the messages, your pupils dilated, your breathing changed. Those are involuntary responses. You weren't lying. John stared at her like she'd just performed magic. You can tell that? I paint faces. I study microexpressions. I notice things. She tilted her head. But that doesn't mean you're forgiven. It just means the story is more complicated than we thought. John nodded slowly, throat working. I understand. He gathered his gifts, still wrapped, still untouched, symbols of good intentions that landed wrong, and moved toward the door. Rita followed him outside, the December air bit at her skin, sharp and clarifying. John, I'll find proof. His voice came out fierce, determined. If Kramer did this, there will be evidence. Emails, records, something. I'll find it. And then what? Then you'll know I'm telling the truth. He looked at her, eyes red and raw. Then maybe, it doesn't change the years that are gone. I know. His shoulders slumped under the weight of lost time. But at least you'll know I didn't choose to leave. That I thought, his voice broke, that I thought I was doing what you wanted. He walked to his car, leaving the gifts on the porch like offerings at an altar no one was sure deserved worship. Inside, Rita found all three children at the window, watching. Kane's face was conflicted. Russell had come back downstairs, tears on his cheeks, arms wrapped around himself. Elvira remained unnervingly calm. As John's taillights disappeared into the snow, Elvira spoke quietly. He believed what he said. I can tell. Kane's voice came out small, wounded, 13 years old. Does that make it better or worse? No one had an answer. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering footprints, erasing evidence, burying the past under layers of white that made everything look clean and new. But underneath, Rita knew the wounds remained, 13 years deep, and possibly not all John's fault. Before we go any further, leave a comment and tell me, would you have believed him? Sometimes the truth is more complicated than we think. And what Rita discovers next changes everything. Don't go anywhere. Rita's phone buzzed at 6:23 a.m. She was already awake, had been since 4, staring at her ceiling, replaying 13 years of assumptions that might have been built on lies. The text was from John. I found something. Can we meet? Just you. She stared at the words until they blurred. By 8 o'clock, she was sitting across from him in a coffee shop 3 blocks from her house. Neutral territory, public enough that emotions couldn't spiral out of control, private enough to speak truths that had been buried too long. John looked worse than he had at dinner, unshaven, eyes hollow with exhaustion. The expensive suit replaced with jeans and a sweater that had seen better years, like he was shedding his billionaire skin piece by piece. He slid a folder across the table. I spent all night going through archived files from the company server. Files I didn't even know still existed. His voice was hoarse from disuse or crying, or both. Kramer was meticulous. He documented everything. Probably thought he'd need leverage someday. Rita opened the folder with trembling hands. The first page was an email. From her old address, the one she'd abandoned years ago because seeing it reminded her of messages John never answered. Dated December 2012. The subject line read, "John, please call me. We need to talk about the babies." Below it, in red, deleted, K. She felt her hands start shaking. The next page, a voicemail transcript. Her words, typed out cold and clinical, "John, it's me again. I know you're scared, but we can figure this out together. Please just call me back. Please." Deleted, K. Another email. "I'm keeping them. All 3. I need to know if you're going to be part of this, or if I'm doing it alone." Deleted, K. Page after page. Messages she'd sent while pregnant, and terrified, and alone. Voicemails she'd left while nursing newborn triplets, and crying from exhaustion. Every single one marked deleted, initialed with that casual, damning K. Rita's vision swam. "There's more," John said quietly. She turned the page. An email from Kramer to himself, the kind of self-documentation arrogant criminals always made. "Fuller's a mess. Perfect timing. Get the girl's signature on separation papers. Tell him she wants nothing to do with him. He'll be too distracted to notice the accounts I'm moving." Another. Intercepted 3 more calls. "She's persistent. Doesn't matter. He thinks she's ghosting him. This works in our favor." And finally, a scanned image of the separation papers Rita had signed. But next to her signature, in different ink, a handwritten note she'd never written. "I've made my decision. Please respect it, and stay out of our lives. Rita." The forgery was good, almost perfect, but Rita knew her own handwriting. And that wasn't it. Rita's hands dropped to the table. The folder fell open, pages scattering like the pieces of her understanding scattering across 13 years. "He destroyed us." Her voice came out broken. "He deliberately, systematically destroyed us." John's eyes were wet. I confronted him. After he tried to take the company, he admitted to the financial manipulation, to the attempted coup, but never. His voice cracked. "I never knew about you. About the messages. If I had known." "You would have what?" Rita looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You would have come back?" "I would have tried." He reached across the table, then pulled his hand back, respecting boundaries. "Rita, I spent 13 years thinking you hated me. That you'd decided I was toxic. That removing me from your life was the best thing for those babies." His voice broke completely. "I convinced myself you were right, that they were better off without me." Rita wiped her eyes roughly. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with morning conversation. Normal people having normal days. While her entire past was rewriting itself in real time. "I need to tell the kids," she whispered. "I understand if you don't want me there." She looked at him, really looked. At the grief carved into his face, the regret that sat in his shoulders like physical weight. The 13 years he'd carried alone, thinking he was honoring her wishes. "You should be there. They deserve to hear it from you." That afternoon, Rita gathered the triplets in the living room. John arrived exactly on time, folder in hand, looking like he was walking to his own execution. The kids sat together on the couch, a united front. Kane's arms were crossed. Russell stared at the floor. Elvira watched John with that clinical gaze. "I found proof," John said without preamble, "of what I told you last night." He opened the folder, spread the pages across the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene, which, Rita realized, they were. Kane leaned forward first. "Read." His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to something darker, more complex. "He deleted everything?" Kane's voice came out strangled. "On purpose? He was trying to take my company. Needed me distracted and isolated." John's hands were shaking again. "I'm not saying this excuses the fact that I left when your mother first told me she was pregnant. I panicked. I was young and terrified and selfish. But after that," he gestured to the papers, "after that, I thought I was doing what she wanted. What you needed. Russell picked up a voicemail transcript. Rita watched her son's face as he read his mother's words from 13 years ago. Desperate, alone, begging for contact that never came because someone had decided to play God with their lives. Mom wrote this? Russell's voice cracked. Rita nodded, throat too tight to speak. Elvira stood, moving to the window. Her back was to them, shoulders rigid with tension she rarely showed. Kane's anger had shifted into something more complicated, a mix of fury at Kramer and confusion about what to feel toward John. So for 13 years, you thought we didn't want you? I thought your mother made the choice that was best for you. That I was. John stopped, composing himself. That I was the problem she needed to remove. But you still sent money. It was the only thing I knew how to do. The only way I could. His voice failed. The only way I could stay connected to something that mattered. Rita felt something crack in her chest. Russell stood abruptly. I need air. He walked out the back door before anyone could stop him, and Rita understood sometimes the truth was too big to hold inside walls. Kane sat back, running his hands through his hair. This is so messed up. I know. You should sue him, Kramer, for Kane gestured helplessly. For everything. What would that fix? John's voice came out tired. It won't give me back the years. Won't let me undo the damage. At the window, Elvira finally spoke. Where is he now? Kramer? Tried to start his own company. Failed. Last I heard, he was working in venture capital in Seattle. Good. Elvira's voice carried surprising venom. I hope he's miserable. Kane looked at his sister, surprised. Elvira rarely showed anger. She turned from the window. He took 13 years from all of us. Not just you and Mom. Us too. Her voice stayed level, clinical, but her eyes blazed. We could have had a father. You could have had your children. Mom could have had. She stopped. He stole time, and you can't get that back. The truth of it settled over the room like ash. John's face crumpled. I know. God. I know. And I don't expect forgiveness from any of you. But I'm here now. And I want. His voice broke. I want to know you. Even if it's just scraps. Even if it's just watching from the sidelines. Kane studied him for a long moment. Then, Russell has a poetry reading at school next week. John looked up. When? Thursday, 7 p.m. I'll be there. It's not fancy, just a school auditorium. Folding chairs and bad acoustics. I'll be there, John repeated, with absolute certainty. And he was. Rita saw him slip into the back row just as the lights dimmed. Overdressed again, he still hadn't figured out the dress code for normal life, but present. Russell read a piece about winter, about cold that preserved things but also killed them, about snow that covered wounds without healing them, about the difference between freezing and frozen. When he finished, the applause was polite, enthusiastic from parents, scattered from students. John stood and clapped until everyone else had stopped, his applause echoing in the quiet auditorium like a promise. Russell saw him. Their eyes met across the distance. Russell's expression was unreadable. Afterward, in the parking lot, Russell walked past John without speaking, but he slowed, almost stopped, glanced back. It wasn't much, but it was something. 2 days later, John appeared at Kane's basketball game. Sat in the bleachers, awkward and alone, while other parents chatted around him in their established social circles. When Kane scored, John jumped to his feet, cheering loud enough that Kane glanced over, embarrassed, but something else too. Something that might have been pride that someone was finally there to see. After the game, Kane nodded at him, just once. John nodded back. It was a language being built from nothing. Elvira's art show at the youth center came next. John arrived with flowers, daisies, not roses, finally learning that expensive wasn't always better. He stood in front of her paintings for 20 minutes. Rita watched him from across the room, saw the way his face changed as he studied each piece, the recognition of loneliness in brushstrokes, the understanding of isolation rendered in color. Later, he approached Elvira carefully. The one with the winter trees, the faces in the bark. Is that our family? Elvira finished. What it could have been. John's breath caught. It's beautiful. It's sad. It's both. Elvira considered this, then nodded. Yeah, it is. Rita noticed things. The way John listened when the kids spoke, leaning forward like every word was scripture, absorbing everything. The way he asked questions that weren't intrusive, but showed he cared, showed he was learning them. The way he never pushed, never demanded, just showed up, consistently. Every game, every reading, every show. Even when the kids barely acknowledged him. Even when Russell still wouldn't speak to him directly. Even when Kane's trust came in fragments scattered across weeks. He kept showing up. One evening, after another tense but less hostile dinner, Elvira caught John on the porch as he was leaving. Rita watched from the kitchen window as her daughter approached him, portfolio tucked under her arm. "Can I ask you something?" Elvira's voice carried through the open door. "Of course. What are you most afraid of?" John didn't hesitate. Didn't deflect. Wasting another December. Elvira tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "It means," he looked at the house, at the light spilling from windows, where his children lived and breathed, and existed, without needing him. "It means I lost 13 years because someone lied, and I was too broken to fight for the truth. I'm afraid of losing more time. Of looking back at the end of my life, and realizing I had chances I didn't take, moments I didn't fight for. So you're here because you're afraid of regret? I'm here because you three deserve a father who shows up, and I'm finally ready to try being that person." He paused. "Even if I fail, even if you never forgive me, at least I'll know I tried." Elvira studied him for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, a sketch, pencil on paper, quick but skilled. She handed it to him. John looked down. It was a drawing of a man standing in snow, shoulders bent but facing forward, toward a house with lights in the windows. "You can keep that," Elvira said, "if you want." John's hands trembled as he held the sketch like it was made of glass. "Thank you." Elvira turned to go back inside, then stopped. "My middle name is Rose. Kane's is Michael. Russell's is James." She disappeared into the house before he could respond. Rita watched John stand alone on her porch, staring at the sketch, tears running down his face in the December cold. For the first time in 13 years, she let herself wonder, what if some distances could be crossed after all? Dinner on December 12th started the same way the last three had: awkward, careful, everyone measuring words before speaking them like diffusing bombs. John had brought groceries this time, not gifts, ingredients. Asked Rita if he could help cook. She'd said yes, surprising herself. They'd worked in careful orbit around each other in the kitchen, John chopping vegetables with unpracticed hands, Rita correcting his technique with instructions that felt almost normal. The triplets had watched from the living room, whispering among themselves. Now they sat at the table, eating the meal they'd made together. Chicken stir-fry, rice. Nothing fancy, but John had looked so proud when Rita said it tasted good, like that small compliment meant more than any business deal ever had. The conversation limped along. Kane talked about his upcoming tournament. Elvira mentioned a new painting series. John listened like every word was precious metal he was collecting. But Russell stayed silent. He'd barely spoken to John since the revelation about Kramer, attended dinners but sat like a ghost at the table. Answered direct questions with one word. Avoided eye contact like John's gaze might burn. Tonight, John made the mistake of trying to bridge the gap. "Russell, your mother mentioned you're working on a new collection of poems. I'd love to read them sometime, if you're comfortable sharing." Russell's fork froze halfway to his mouth. The table went quiet, the kind of quiet that has teeth and draws blood. "Why?" Russell's voice came out flat. John blinked, caught off guard. "Because I want to know what you think, what you create. You're obviously talented, and you want to know what I think?" Russell set his fork down carefully. Too carefully. Like he was placing explosives. "You want to know what I create?" "Russell." Rita's voice carried warning. "No, it's fine." Russell's jaw clenched. "He wants to know. So I'll tell him." He turned to John, eyes blazing with something that had been building for weeks. "I write about absence. About holes in the shape of people who were supposed to be there. About what it feels like to watch your mother cry in the bathroom at 2 a.m. because she's so tired she can't remember why she's crying anymore." John's face went white. "I write about wondering if you're broken somehow. If there's something wrong with you that made your father choose literally anything else over knowing you existed. I write about—" His voice cracked. "About pretending it doesn't hurt, while your classmates complain about their dads being annoying, or embarrassing, or whatever. Because at least their dads showed up to be annoying." "Russell, stop." Kane's voice was gentle. "Why?" he asked. Russell stood, chair scraping. "You want to read my poems? They're all about you. Every single one. Even the ones that aren't supposed to be." His voice broke completely. "You're the hole everything else falls into." He walked out of the room, up the stairs. His door slammed hard enough to rattle the walls and shake the frames on them. Silence descended like fog. John sat frozen, face crumpled, hands trembling against the table. Kane stared at his plate. Elvira watched John with that clinical gaze, measuring his reaction with the precision of a scientist. Rita stood. "I'll go talk to him." "No." John's voice came out strangled. "Let me, please." "John, I need to. He stopped, breathing hard. "I need to try." Rita wanted to say no, to protect Russell from more hurt. But she saw something in John's face. Not entitlement or ego, but genuine anguish that matched Russell's pain. "5 minutes," she said quietly. "If he asks you to leave, you leave." John nodded and headed upstairs. Rita listened to the muffled voices through Russell's door. Couldn't make out words, but heard tones: Russell's anger, like waves crashing, John's careful gentleness, like someone approaching a wounded animal. After 3 minutes, John emerged, eyes red, and came back downstairs without a word. He finished dinner in silence, helped clean up with methodical precision, then gathered his coat. At the door, he turned to Rita. "Can I talk to you? Alone? Just for a minute?" She followed him onto the porch. December wind bit at her skin. John stood with his hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders hunched. "He's right. Everything he said. I am the whole." "John." "No, listen. Please." He looked at her, face raw. "I've been trying so hard to show up now, to prove I can be consistent, but it doesn't fix what he said. The years of absence carved something out of them, out of all of them. And I did that." Rita wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe—" He stopped. "Maybe I just need you to know that I see it. The damage. I'm not blind to it anymore." They stood in silence. Rita felt something shifting between them, the anger that had sustained her for 13 years, slowly eroding like a riverbank, revealing something underneath she wasn't sure she wanted to examine. "Wait here," she said suddenly. She went inside, climbed the stairs to her bedroom, opened her closet. On the top shelf, buried behind old sweaters and forgotten winter coats, was a box she hadn't touched in years. A shoebox, lid taped shut, covered in dust that spoke of deliberate avoidance. She brought it downstairs, handed it to John on the porch. "What is this?" "Open it later. At home. Alone." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I wrote you letters, every December. For 13 years. Never sent them." She paused. "You should read them. So you understand what those years actually looked like. What they cost." John took the box like it might shatter in his hands. "Rita. Go home, John. Read them. Then—" She stopped, unsure how to finish. "Then we'll see." He nodded, clutching the box to his chest like treasure, and walked to his car. Rita watched until his taillights disappeared. Then she went back inside to find Russell. John made it to his apartment before his hands started shaking so badly he could barely grip the box. He set it on his dining table, a table meant for 12, that he'd never used for more than one. A monument to his loneliness. Stared at it like it contained his own judgment. Then he carefully peeled away the tape. Inside, 13 envelopes, one for each December, each marked with a year in Rita's handwriting. He opened the first one, December 2012. "John, the babies were born October 19th, all 3. Kane came first, screaming like he was angry at the world. Then Russell, quiet, studying everything with these solemn eyes. Then Elvira, studying everything with these dark eyes that look exactly like yours. I thought you might call, might check, might wonder if they were okay, if I was okay. You didn't. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. because Russell won't sleep and Kane won't stop crying, and Elvira just stares at me like she's disappointed I'm the only parent she got. I'm so tired, I can't remember what day it is. I called you 15 times this week. You never answered. I don't understand what I did to make you hate me this much. Rita. John's vision blurred. He opened the second letter. December 2013. John. Kane said, "Dada today." Except there's no dada, so he was just saying sounds that mean nothing. But it broke something in me anyway. They're walking now, getting into everything. I can't afford childcare, so I'm bringing them to work. My boss is understanding, but I can see her patience wearing thin. Your check came. I put it in their college fund. I don't want your money for myself. I never did. I just wanted you. God, that sounds pathetic. I need to stop writing these. You're never going to read them. Rita. December 2014. They started preschool today. Russell cried the entire time. Kane punched a kid who asked where his dad was. Elvira painted a picture of our family, 4 people, not 5. I'm working 2 jobs now. Morning shift at the youth center, night shift cleaning offices. I see them at dinner and bedtime. That's it. I'm missing everything. And you're missing more. John's hands trembled as he opened letter after letter. Rita's exhaustion bled through every word, her confusion, her anger, her desperate, aching loneliness that mirrored his own, but was so much worse because she was doing it all alone. December 2016. Russell asked me today why you don't love us. I told him you do, you just show it differently. I lied to my son. I don't even know if you think about them, if you know their names, if you remember they exist outside of a bank transfer. December 2018. Kane made the basketball team. He's good, really good, natural athlete. He looked for you in the stands during his first game. I watched him scan the crowd, hope in his eyes. Watched his face when he didn't find you. Watched hope turn to something harder. I hate you for that. But I also wonder if you're okay, if you're happy, if you ever think about what you're missing. December 2020. The pandemic hit. I lost both jobs. Your check kept us from losing the house. I should be grateful. Instead, I just feel hollow. They're 10 now, growing up fast, too fast. Russell writes poetry that makes me cry. Kane is taller than me. Elvira paints things I don't understand but that feel important. You're missing everything that matters. December 2022. This is the last one, I promise. After this, I stop. They're 12 now, almost teenagers. Russell asked me today if you ever loved me, if we were happy before they came. I told him yes. That we were young and scared, but we loved each other. I don't know if that's true anymore. Memory gets fuzzy when you're tired, but I want them to believe love existed before they did, that they came from something good. Even if you left, even if I'm doing this alone, even if they'll never know their father, I'm letting go of my anger now. For them, not for you. Goodbye, John. Rita. But there was a 13th letter. December 2023. John's hands shook as he opened it. John. I lied. I couldn't stop. Kane got a scholarship offer for basketball. Russell won a poetry award. Elvira had her first gallery show at the youth center. You missed all of it. And I realized, I don't write these because I think you'll read them. I write them because I need to tell someone, even if that someone is a ghost. They ask about you less now. I don't know if that's growth or grief or just acceptance. I hope you're happy. I hope your company was worth it. I hope someday you realize what you gave up. Rita. John collapsed forward onto the table, letters scattered around him like evidence of his failures, sobs tearing out of his chest like something vital was being ripped away. He read them all again, every word, every moment he'd missed, every night Rita had suffered alone, every question his children had asked that she'd had to answer without him. He broke, completely. At 6:15 a.m., Rita heard knocking. She opened the door to find John on her porch, same clothes from last night, eyes swollen and red, face ravaged by a night of crying. I read them. His voice was barely audible. All of them. Rita's chest tightened. You were so alone. The words came out broken. You were exhausted and scared, and I was. He stopped, breathing hard. I was living my life like you didn't exist. Like they didn't exist. Thinking I was doing the noble thing, respecting boundaries that were lies. John, I didn't deserve your forgiveness then. His voice cracked completely. I don't deserve it now. But I want to earn my place in their lives. I want to, he stopped, pressing his palms against his eyes. I want to fill the hole Russell talked about, even if it takes the rest of my life, even if they never fully let me in. I want to try. Rita looked at him, this man who'd finally read 13 years of truth, who'd stayed up all night bearing witness to her pain. Something in her softened, not much, but enough. Then keep trying, she said quietly. Keep showing up. Keep proving you mean it. I will. I swear to you, I will. He turned to leave, then stopped. Thank you for letting me read them. For, his voice failed, for everything. Rita watched him walk to his car, exhausted and broken and somehow more present than he'd been in all the weeks since he'd returned. She closed the door and found Russell sitting on the stairs, watching. His face was complicated, anger and hurt and something else. Something that looked almost like hope trying to emerge from wreckage. He really read them? Russell's voice came out small. All of them. And he cried? Yes. Russell nodded slowly, then stood, disappearing back upstairs without another word. But Rita had seen it, the crack in his armor, the first fragile opening toward something that might, eventually, look like forgiveness. Outside, dawn broke over Briar Ridge, painting the snow gold and pink. And for the first time in 13 years, Rita allowed herself to believe that some wounds, given time and truth and relentless showing up, might actually heal. This is the kind of story that stays with you. If this is hitting you in the heart right now, if you know someone who needs to hear that healing is possible, even when it seems impossible, share this. And stay with me, because what happens next at the Youth Center Winter Showcase will change everything. The Briar Ridge Community Youth Center looked like someone had swallowed Christmas and thrown it back up in the best possible way. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling on fishing line, spinning slowly in the heat from too many bodies. Folding chairs, arranged in crooked rows. A makeshift stage constructed from plywood and hope and duct tape. The smell of burnt coffee and sugar cookies filled the air, mixing with nervous energy. Rita stood backstage, clipboard in hand, managing controlled chaos. Kids in various states of preparation, some confident, some terrified. All buzzing with that particular energy that came from performing for people who actually cared. Russell sat alone in the corner, journal clutched to his chest, lips moving silently, rehearsing. Rita recognized the signs of his anxiety, the way his knee bounced, the way his fingers traced the journal's spine like a talisman that might protect him. She crossed to him. You okay? He looked up, eyes wide. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. Nobody here is judging. He's here. Russell's voice dropped to a whisper. I saw him come in, back row. Rita's stomach tightened. John had asked permission to attend. She'd said yes, but now, seeing Russell's panic, she wondered if that had been a mistake. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Russell's jaw set with determination that looked exactly like John's. I need to. The showcase started right on time, a miracle Rita attributed to caffeine and prayer. Younger kids performed first. A dance routine that was more enthusiasm than choreography. A guitar player who forgot the bridge, but powered through with admirable courage. Elvira's paintings displayed on easels, each one drawing murmurs of appreciation from the assembled crowd. Then it was Russell's turn. Rita watched from the wings as her son walked on stage, journal in hand, looking smaller than his 13 years. The audience settled. She could see John in the back row, leaning forward, every muscle tensed with attention. Russell opened his journal, cleared his throat. This is called December. His voice started strong. Every year the snow falls the same, white and clean and covering everything underneath. People say snow makes the world new, but underneath the white, the mud is still mud, the dead grass is still dead, and the holes. His voice cracked. He stopped, stared at the page. The audience waited, patient and kind. Russell's hands started shaking. Rita stepped forward, ready to intervene, but something in Russell's face stopped her. He wasn't frozen with stage fright. He was breaking open. I can't, Russell's voice came out strangled. He looked up from his journal, scanning the audience until his eyes found John. I can't pretend anymore. The room went silent. This poem, Russell's voice shook. It's about you. They're all about you. Every single one I've ever written. Tears started streaming down his face. And I hate that. I hate that you're the center of everything, even though you were never there. I hate that I spent 13 years wondering what was wrong with me that made you not want to know me." Parents shifted uncomfortably. Kids watched, riveted, sensing they were witnessing something real. John sat frozen, face draining of color. "And here's the moment that changes everything. Watch this." "Where were you?" Russell's voice exploded, raw and desperate, and 13 years of pain condensed into 3 words that echoed through the auditorium. "We needed you. I needed you. And you just—" He stopped, breathing hard. "You sent money like that, fixed it. Like we were a bill you could pay and forget." The silence in the room was absolute. Rita started toward the stage, but John was already moving. He walked down the aisle slowly, hands visible and empty, like approaching something wild that might bolt. Parents turned to watch. Some recognized him. She saw the recognition flicker across faces. John Fuller, the billionaire, that John Fuller. He climbed onto the stage, stood 3 feet from Russell, not reaching out, just present. "You're right," John said, voice carrying across the silent room. "About everything." Russell's breath hitched. "I wasn't there. You did need me. And I failed you." John's voice cracked. "I was scared and selfish, and convinced myself that money was enough. That providing from a distance was the same as being present." He stopped, pressing his palm against his chest like it hurt to breathe. "I was wrong. About all of it." "That doesn't fix it," Russell whispered. "I know. Nothing fixes it. The years are gone. I can't get them back." John's voice broke completely. "But I'm here now, and I want to know you, the real you. The one who writes poems that hurt to read because they're true. The one who's sensitive and brilliant and sees the world in ways I never could." Russell's face crumpled. "I don't know how to forgive you." "Then don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." John took a shaky breath. "But let me try to earn it. Let me show up. Let me prove that I'm not the same person who left." The audience watched, transfixed. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was something raw and real, happening in real time. Russell stood trembling, tears running unchecked. Then, so quietly, Rita almost missed it. "Okay." John's expression shattered with relief. He opened his arms, an invitation, not a demand. Russell hesitated, then stepped forward into the hug he'd never had, breaking down completely against his father's chest. The audience erupted in applause, not for a performance, but for something more important, for healing happening live, for a family being built from rubble. Rita wiped her eyes from the wings. Kane and Elvira sat in the front row, both crying openly. When Russell finally pulled away, he wiped his face roughly. "I still want to read my poem." "Please," John said. "I want to hear it." John stepped off stage. Russell opened his journal with shaking hands and read the real poem this time, not the edited version he'd planned. Every painful, beautiful line about absence and longing, and the specific shape of father-shaped holes. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Rita didn't see the cameras until it was too late. Someone had filmed the whole thing, posted it online within minutes, with a caption that made it go viral. By the time the showcase ended, the video had 10,000 views. By morning, it had 1 million. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO John Fuller publicly apologizes to son. He abandoned, and the footage will destroy you." Rita's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Unknown numbers, media requests. By 7, there were reporters on her lawn like vultures circling something dying. She kept the kids inside, curtains drawn, while the circus assembled outside. "Mom, there's a news van," Kane reported from the window. 3 of them now. Rita's phone buzzed. Text from John. "I'm handling this. Stay inside. I'm so sorry." "Handling what?" Elvira appeared beside Rita. Then every TV channel switched to breaking news. John Fuller, standing at a podium outside Fuller Innovations headquarters, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters shouting questions like accusations. He looked calm, determined, nothing like the broken man from last night. "I'm here to address the video that's circulating." His voice was steady as steel. "Yes, that was me. Yes, that was my son. And yes, everything you saw was real." The reporters erupted with questions. John held up a hand. 13 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life. I walked away from the woman I loved and the children we created together. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that they were better off without me. I was wrong." Rita's breath caught, The triplets gathered around her, watching their father on national television. I've spent the past 2 weeks trying to build relationships with my children, trying to repair damage I caused. And last night, my son confronted me publicly about my failures as a father. He had every right. Everything he said was true. More questions shouted. John continued over them. I'm here to announce that effective immediately, I'm stepping back from my role as CEO of Fuller Innovations. The reporters exploded. Rita's hand flew to her mouth. I will remain on the board, but I'm removing myself from day-to-day operations, because I've spent 13 years building an empire, and it cost me everything that actually mattered. His voice cracked but held. I missed my children's entire lives, their first words, first steps, first heartbreaks. I thought professional success was enough. I was wrong about that too. A reporter shouted, "Are you saying family is more important than your company?" John looked directly into the camera. I'm saying I already lost 13 years. I'm not losing another day. Your investors are going to panic. Let them. I built this company from nothing. If it can't survive without me micromanaging every decision, then I built it wrong. He paused. My children are 13 years old. In 5 years, they'll be adults with lives I won't be part of unless I earn my place now. No company is worth that. What about your professional legacy? John's expression shifted, something fierce and final crossing his face. My legacy isn't Fuller Innovations. It's Kane, Russell, and Elvira. And right now, that legacy thinks I didn't want them. I'm spending whatever time I have left proving them wrong. He walked away from the podium, ignoring the questions shouted after him, and Rita felt something fundamental shift in her chest. The broadcast cut to analysts discussing the business implications, stock prices dropping, board reactions, investor panic. Rita stood frozen, remote in hand, trying to process what she just witnessed. John Fuller, billionaire, empire builder, man who'd chosen his company over his family, had just chosen his family over his company. On national television, with the whole world watching. Did he just? Kane's voice came out stunned. He quit his job. Elvira finished, voice full of wonder. For us. Russell's face was complicated disbelief and hope, warring across his features. People don't actually do that, not in real life. But he had. Rita's phone buzzed. Text from John. I meant every word. This is who I'm choosing to be. For the first time in 13 years, Rita allowed herself to believe him. Not because of his words, because of his actions, because he'd stood in front of the world and made himself vulnerable in ways billionaires didn't do. Because he'd risked everything he'd built for a chance at redemption. Is he coming over? Kane asked quietly. Before Rita could answer, her phone rang. John's number. She answered, John, don't go outside. The media is everywhere. I'm handling it. I've hired security for your house. His words came fast, urgent. I'm so sorry. I should have anticipated this. The video? The attention? John. Rita's voice stopped him. What you did? At the press conference. Did you mean it? Silence. Then. Every word. My board is threatening to remove me entirely. My investors are in revolt. My stock price dropped 40% in the last hour. He paused. And I don't care. Not even a little. Because for the first time in 13 years, I'm choosing right. Rita's throat tightened. Come over. After the media clears. Come have dinner. Are you sure? She looked at her children, all three gathered around her, processing this impossible gift of a father who'd finally, publicly, irrevocably chosen them. I'm sure. After she hung up, Elvira spoke quietly. He gave up everything. Not everything, Russell corrected, voice thick with emotion. He gave up everything else. For us. Kane wrapped an arm around his mother's shoulders. Is it weird that I kind of want to hug him now? Rita laughed through tears. No, baby. It's not weird at all. Outside, the media circus continued. But inside Rita's modest home, something fundamental had shifted. The man who'd been absent had finally, undeniably, shown up. And this time, the whole world was watching. The media circus lasted 3 days before something shinier distracted them. A celebrity scandal, a political crisis, the usual churn of news cycles. By December 17th, Rita's lawn was empty again. The reporters had moved on to the next scandal, leaving behind trampled grass, and a family that felt somehow more solid for having weathered the storm together. John came to dinner that night. Not overdressed this time, jeans and a sweater that had clearly been worn before, developing that lived-in quality that made him look more human. He brought groceries again, ingredients, not apologies, and helped Rita cook while the triplets did homework at the dining table. It felt almost normal. Almost. Kane broke the careful peace when he appeared in the kitchen doorway, textbook in hand, expression conflicted. "I have a question." He directed it at the air between his parents, not quite ready to ask John directly. Rita dried her hands on a towel. "My history project. We're supposed to interview someone about a major life decision and analyze the consequences." He shifted his weight. "I was thinking." He stopped, started again. "Mr. Fuller, I mean," his face flushed. "Do you think I could interview you about the press conference?" The kitchen went silent except for the simmer of sauce on the stove. John turned from the cutting board, knife still in hand, expression careful. "You want to interview me? For school?" "It's not." Kane's voice hardened defensively. "It's not like I'm trying to." "I'd be honored." John set down the knife, voice steady. "When do you need it?" Kane blinked, surprised at the easy acceptance. "Friday. But if you're busy?" "I'm not busy. Not anymore." A ghost of a smile. Turns out stepping back from running a company frees up considerable time. Something shifted in Kane's posture. Not forgiveness yet, but a crack in the wall. "Tomorrow after practice? I'll be there." Kane nodded and disappeared back to the dining room. Rita caught John's eye, saw the gratitude there, the overwhelming relief at being asked, being wanted, even for something as small as a school project. "He's trying," she said quietly. "So am I." 2 days later, Russell appeared in the living room while John helped Elvira hang new paintings. No announcement, no warning. Just stood in the doorway holding his journal like a shield. "Can we talk?" His voice came out barely audible. "Just us?" John looked to Rita. She nodded. They walked to the small park 2 blocks away, the one with the rusted swings, and the basketball court where Kane spent hours shooting. Sat on opposite ends of a bench, December cold biting through their coats. For 5 minutes, neither spoke. Then Russell opened his journal. "I wrote something. After the showcase. After everything." He didn't look at John. "You don't have to read it now. But I want you to have it." He tore out a page carefully, like it hurt, and handed it across the bench. John took it with trembling hands, read while Russell stared at his shoes. The poem was called Thaw, about ice melting, about discovering what had been preserved underneath the freeze, about being terrified that warmth would reveal decay but finding instead something that could still grow. When John finished, his eyes were wet. "This is extraordinary." Russell's shoulders tensed. "You don't have to. I'm not saying it because I'm your father. I'm saying it because it's true." John's voice steadied. "You have a gift, Russell, a real one. The way you see the world, it's something special." Russell finally looked at him. "You really think so?" "I know so." They sat in silence again. But this time it felt different. Less like a chasm and more like a bridge being built, plank by painful plank. "I'm not ready to call you Dad," Russell said quietly. "I understand." But maybe he stopped, started again. Maybe John is okay, for now. "For now" is perfect. Russell nodded, stood to leave, then stopped. "Thank you for reading it. Thank you for sharing it." Russell walked home alone, but his steps looked lighter than they had in weeks. Elvira's approach was more direct. She appeared in John's car one afternoon when he was preparing to leave after dinner, portfolio tucked under her arm. "Can you look at something?" John nearly jumped out of his skin. "How long have you been there?" "Since you got in. You're not very observant." She climbed into the passenger seat without invitation. "I need an outside perspective. Mom's too nice. Kane doesn't understand composition. Russell only cares about the emotional content." She spread paintings across the dashboard, recent work, still tacky with half-dry paint. John studied each one carefully. A series of winter scenes, but not traditional landscapes. Abstract interpretations of cold. Isolation rendered in blue and white, and the kind of gray that felt heavy. "These are," he stopped, searching for adequate words. "Elvira, these are museum quality. You're biased." "I'm serious. The way you've captured," he gestured helplessly. I don't have the vocabulary. But these make me feel the loneliness they're depicting. That's not easy. Elvira studied him with that clinical gaze. You see the loneliness? It's the dominant theme, isn't it? Most people see the cold, the winter. They miss the isolation. She gathered the paintings carefully. But you saw it. Because I know what it looks like. John's voice went quiet. I lived in it for 13 years. Elvira was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm painting a new series, about reunions, about things that were frozen starting to melt. She met his eyes. I'd like you to see them. When they're finished, I'd like that too. She climbed out of the car, then turned back. John? Yeah? I'm glad you came back, she said it clinically, like stating a fact, but her eyes were softer than usual. Even though it's complicated, I'm glad. She was gone before he could respond, disappearing into the house with her portfolio. John sat in his car for 20 minutes, crying quietly in the dark. The youth center crisis hit on December 18th. Rita got the call at work. The director's voice was panicked. Our primary grant fell through. The state's cutting funding. Without emergency donations, we're closing in January. Rita felt the floor tilt. This center had been her life for 8 years. These kids, many from families like hers, struggling, barely holding on, needed this place. She spent the afternoon frantically calling donors, drafting emergency appeals, calculating how much of her savings she could liquidate. John found her at her desk at 7 p.m., surrounded by spreadsheets, makeup smudged from crying. Rita? She looked up. What are you doing here? Kane said you were upset. What's wrong? The whole story spilled out: the grant, the funding, the impossible math that didn't add up to survival. John listened, then asked quietly, how much do you need? John, no. How much? It's not your problem. Rita, how much? She told him. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in clipped, professional tones, hung up. Done. The funds will transfer tomorrow. Rita stared at him. You can't just... I already did. He sat on the edge of her desk. But there's something you should know. Her stomach dropped at his tone. I've been funding this center for 5 years. He said it quietly, like a confession. Anonymous donations, different accounts. I made it look like grants, so you wouldn't... He stopped. So you wouldn't know it was me. Rita felt the room spin. What? After I discovered what Kramer did, after I realized you'd been trying to reach me, I hired an investigator. Found out where you worked, what you cared about. I couldn't. His voice cracked. I couldn't face you. Couldn't face what I'd done. But I could do this. Keep this place running. Keep the thing you loved alive. How much? Rita's voice came out strangled. Over the 5 years, about $2 million. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. $2 million? You've been secretly funding my workplace for 5 years and never told me? I was ashamed. The words burst out. I wanted to help, but I didn't. I couldn't. He stopped, breathing hard. It was the only way I knew how to stay connected to something that mattered. The only way to feel like I was part of your life, even from a distance. Rita paced, stopped, paced again. You should have told me. I know. You should have. Her voice broke. All those times I thought we were barely keeping the lights on. All those nights I lost sleep over funding. And you were... I'm sorry. I should have been honest. But I thought... He looked at her helplessly. I thought if you knew it was me, you'd refuse it. And these kids needed it more than you needed to punish me. Rita wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him for the deception, the secret manipulation of her workplace, the assumption that he knew what she needed. But looking at his face, at the guilt and shame and desperate hope, she felt her anger dissolving into something more complicated. You can't keep doing this, she said quietly. Making decisions for me, thinking you know what's best. I know. You're right. If we're going to... She stopped, restarted. If there's going to be any kind of relationship here, even just co-parenting, it has to be honest. Completely honest. I understand. He stood. No more secrets, I promise. They stood in her office, surrounded by financial documents and failed funding plans, and Rita felt something fundamental shift between them. The walls she'd built weren't gone, but they were melting. Thank you, she said finally, for keeping this place alive, even if you did it the wrong way. You're welcome. And Rita? He paused at the door. For what it's worth watching what you've built here, the lives you've changed, it's extraordinary. You're extraordinary." He left before she could respond. Rita sank into her chair, head in her hands, crying for reasons she couldn't quite name. That night, snow began falling again. Rita stood at her kitchen window, watching flakes drift past the streetlight. It looked exactly like the night John had first appeared on her porch, the same soft spiral, the same quiet accumulation. But everything felt different. Behind her, the house hummed with life. Kane on the phone with John, laughing about something from the interview. Russell at the table, writing. Elvira, painting in the living room, humming, under her breath. Her children, healing, growing, letting their father in, piece by careful piece. Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering the world in white. But this time, Rita didn't feel dread. She felt something she hadn't allowed herself in 13 years. Hope. Rita made the decision on December 23rd, standing in the grocery store, staring at a package of cinnamon rolls, the fancy kind she only bought for Christmas morning. She picked up her phone before she could talk herself out of it. "Would you like to come for Christmas breakfast? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. The response came in seconds. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'll be there." She bought the cinnamon rolls, and enough ingredients for the breakfast she used to make when she still believed in fresh starts, scrambled eggs with cheese, bacon, orange juice, the works. At home, she found all 3 kids in the living room, heads together, whispering. They scattered when she entered. "What are you plotting?" Rita asked, setting down groceries. "Nothing," Kane said too quickly. "Christmas stuff," Elvira added, which was somehow both vague and specific. Russell just smiled, that rare, full smile that had been appearing more often lately. Rita let it go. Whatever they were planning, it felt good. It felt like family. Christmas Eve arrived, with frost on the windows, and that particular hush that always settled over December 24th, the world holding its breath before the plunge into celebration. The kids spent the afternoon at Kane's basketball friend's house for their annual gift exchange. Rita used the quiet to clean, to cook, to prepare the house for tomorrow's breakfast, with a care that felt almost ceremonial. She was pulling cookies from the oven when her phone buzzed. "John, can I come by tonight? I have something I need to say before tomorrow." Her hands stilled on the hot pan. "Okay. 7? I'll be there." He arrived exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine and looking nervous in a way she'd never seen on Billionaire John Fuller, but was becoming familiar on this version, the one trying to rebuild himself from scratch. "The kids?" he asked as she let him in. "Still out. They'll be back by 8. She took the wine, gestured to the couch. "Sit. I'll get glasses." When she returned, he was staring at the Christmas tree, a modest thing covered in ornaments the kids had made over the years. Paper snowflakes, popsicle stick reindeer, photos in handmade frames. "I've missed so many Christmases," he said quietly. Rita handed him a glass. Sat beside him, not close, but not distant. 13. Did they believe in Santa? The question caught her off guard. Until they were 8. Kane figured it out first, told the others. They cried for an hour. John's face did something complicated. "I should have been there for that." "Yes, you should have." Rita sipped her wine. "But you weren't. And we survived." They sat in silence. The house creaked around them, warm and lived in and full of the ghosts of Christmases John would never get back. "Why did you invite me tomorrow?" He asked it carefully. Like the wrong word might shatter everything. Rita considered her answer. "Because it's time. Because the kids are ready. Because..." She stopped. "Because... I think you've earned it." John's breath caught. "I don't know if I have. That's not for you to decide." More silence. Then, John set down his glass, turned to face her fully. "I need to tell you something. Before tomorrow. Before we..." He gestured helplessly. "Before this becomes whatever it's becoming." Rita's stomach tightened. "Okay. I loved you, 13 years ago. Before everything broke." The words came out raw. "I was terrified and young and drowning in debt and responsibility. But I loved you. And when you told me you were pregnant, my first feeling wasn't fear. It was..." His voice cracked. "It was joy. For about 10 seconds, before the panic set in, I felt pure joy." Rita's vision blurred. "And then I convinced myself I wasn't ready, that I'd ruin everything. that you deserved better." He stopped, breathing hard. "But the truth is, I was scared of failing, scared of not being enough. So I chose the thing I could control, my company, over the thing that terrified me. You, us, them. John, let me finish, please." He pressed his palms against his eyes. "I've spent 13 years telling myself I made the logical choice, the responsible choice. But it wasn't. It was the coward's choice. And it cost me everything." Rita set down her own glass with trembling hands. "I loved you too. Before." John looked at her, eyes red. "I used to imagine what our life would look like. You and me and the babies. I'd lie awake planning it, what we'd name them, where we'd live, how we'd figure it out together." Her voice broke. "And when you left, I didn't just lose you. I lost that whole future I'd built in my head. Rita, but here's what I never told you." She turned to face him. "I never stopped wondering, even after years of being angry, even after convincing myself I hated you. Part of me always wondered who you could have been if you'd stayed, what kind of father, what kind of—" She stopped. "What kind of partner?" John finished softly. "Yeah." They looked at each other across the space between them, a space that had been vast and unbridgeable but was somehow shrinking. "I'm not the same person I was," John said. "The last 3 weeks watching you parent, seeing what you built, learning who they are, it's changed me. I can't go back to who I was before." "Good. Because that person was kind of terrible." He laughed, surprised and genuine. "Yeah, he really was." Rita felt something warm spreading through her chest. "I'm not the same either. I'm harder now. Less trusting. More careful. You should be, after what I put you through. But I'm also—" She searched for words. "I'm also tired of being angry. It's exhausting, holding grudges. And watching you with them, seeing how hard you're trying." She stopped. "It makes it hard to stay mad. I don't want your forgiveness if it's just exhaustion." "It's not," Rita's voice steadied. "It's something more complicated. It's seeing you choose them over everything else. It's watching Russell hug you after the showcase. It's Kane calling you for advice. It's Elvira showing you her art first." She paused. "It's believing that maybe people really can change." John's expression cracked. "I want to kiss you right now." Rita's breath stopped. "Don't." "I know, I won't, but I needed you to know." "Why tell me if you're not going to?" "Because I'm done with secrets, done with hiding what I feel." He held her gaze. "I want you to know that I still love you, that I never stopped, that these 3 weeks have shown me everything I threw away." His voice dropped. "But I also know I don't have the right. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So I'm telling you because you deserve honesty, not because I expect anything in return." Rita felt tears sliding down her face. "This is so unfair." "I know. You can't just show up after 13 years and say things like that." "I know. I have walls, John, huge ones, built over years of doing this alone." "I know. And I'm not asking you to tear them down." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. "I'm just asking you to let me prove I'm worth the risk, however long that takes." Rita looked at their joined hands, his larger, scarred from years of keyboard work, hers smaller, rough, from youth center maintenance and single motherhood. They fit together like they always had. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. What if you leave again?" "I won't." "You can't promise that." "You're right. Life happens. People die. Things change." He squeezed her hand. "But I can promise that I will never choose to leave. That I will fight for this, for you, for them, until my last breath." Rita pulled her hand back, stood, walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again. Always December. Always snow. Always this quiet accumulation of cold that somehow felt like hope. "I need time," she said to the glass. "I'll give you whatever you need. And I need you to keep showing up, not just for them, for yourself, because you want to be a better person, not because you want me back." "I understand." She turned to face him. "But John, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, not yet." His face transformed relief and gratitude, and something deeper. "Not yet is more than I deserve." The front door burst open. Kane, Russell, and Elvira tumbled in, snow-covered and laughing, arguing about something that made no sense. They stopped when they saw John. "You're still here," Kane said, surprised. "Your mom and I were talking." John stood, composing himself. "Merry Christmas Eve." "Merry Christmas Eve," Russell echoed, then disappeared upstairs with a mysterious smile. After John left, Rita stood alone in her living room, listening to her children whisper and laugh in Russell's room, planning something, building something. She walked to the tree, picked up an ornament one the triplets had made when they were 5, their handprints in clay, painted red and green. Tomorrow, John would be here for Christmas breakfast. The first time ever. Tomorrow, they would be a family, fragile and new, and still figuring out what that meant. Rita hung the ornament back on the tree and whispered to the quiet room. "Maybe people can change." Upstairs, wrapping paper rustled. Her children laughed. Outside, snow continued falling, covering the world in white. And for the first time in 13 years, Rita went to bed on Christmas Eve, feeling not dread or anger or loneliness, but something that felt dangerously close to peace. Across town, John sat at his dining table, surrounded by wrapping paper and gifts. Not expensive ones this time. Not the kind that screamed, "I have money," and no idea what you actually want. For Kane, a leather journal to record plays and strategies, with his name embossed on the cover. And a framed photo John and Kane at his last basketball game, both cheering. For Russell, a first edition poetry collection by his favorite author. And inside, John's own attempt at a poem clumsy and unpracticed, but honest. For Elvira, professional-grade art supplies. And a small painting John had commissioned from a local artist, a winter scene with a father and daughter walking side by side, their footprints meeting in the snow. For Rita, a donation in her name to the youth center, and a letter, 13 pages, one for each year he'd missed, telling her everything he should have said. He wrapped each gift carefully, hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. Tomorrow would be the first Christmas he'd spent with his children. He intended to make it count. We're almost there. This family has been through hell and back, and what happens Christmas morning will bring everything full circle. If this story has moved you, hit that like button and subscribe, because stories about redemption and second chances matter. Let's finish this together. Rita woke at 6 on Christmas morning to find all 3 children already awake, whispering urgently in the hallway. "He'll be here in 3 hours, Kane was saying. "Did you finish the frame?" Russell asked. "Last night. It's perfect." Elvira's voice carried that rare excitement she usually reserved for completed paintings. Rita listened from her bedroom, smiling into her pillow. Whatever they planned, it mattered to them. That was enough. She rose, started breakfast. The cinnamon rolls went into the oven. Bacon sizzled in the pan. The coffee maker gurgled its familiar morning song. Outside, snow had fallen through the night, covering the world in pristine white. Their first Christmas with John. The thought still felt surreal. By 8:30, the house smelled like sugar and coffee and promise. The triplets had arranged gifts under the tree with meticulous care, including one large package wrapped in newspaper comics and tied with kitchen twine, positioned prominently in front. "That one's for John," Elvira said when Rita raised an eyebrow. "From all of us." "What is it?" "You'll see." Kane's smile was mysterious. At 8:58, headlights appeared in the driveway. Rita's stomach flipped. The kids raced to the window. John emerged from his car, carrying wrapped packages, not too many, not too few. He stood in the driveway for a moment, looking at the house with its crooked Christmas lights and modest decorations, and Rita saw his lips move. A prayer, maybe, or a promise to himself. She opened the door before he could knock. "Merry Christmas." His eyes were already wet. "Merry Christmas." He stepped inside, and the house that had been built for 4 suddenly felt complete with 5. They gathered in the living room, arranged around the tree like planets finding orbit. John sat in the armchair, the one that had always been empty, waiting. The triplets sprawled on the floor, Rita perched on the couch arm, close enough to participate, but far enough to observe. "Presents?" Kane asked, bouncing slightly. "Food first," Rita said. "It's tradition." They ate breakfast together. Cinnamon rolls pulled apart in sticky layers. Bacon distributed with mathematical precision. Orange juice poured into mismatched glasses. Conversation flowed easier than it had weeks ago, still careful in places, but with genuine laughter breaking through. John told a story about his first Christmas running Fuller Innovations. when he'd accidentally scheduled a board meeting for December 25th, and no one showed up. Russell laughed so hard, juice came out his nose. Elvira recorded the moment in her mental catalog of father-shaped memories she was building. After breakfast, they returned to the tree. John should go first, Russell said, surprising everyone. John looked uncertain. I don't want to. Go first, Kane agreed. We want you to. So John distributed his gifts, with trembling hands. Kane opened his first, saw the leather journal embossed with his name, flipped through blank pages waiting to be filled with plays and strategies and dreams. Found the framed photo him and John at the basketball game, both mid-cheer, both looking genuinely happy. This is Kane's voice caught. This is really cool. Thank you. Russell's turn. The first edition poetry collection felt heavy and important in his hands. He opened the front cover, saw the inscription in John's handwriting. For Russell, James Fuller, may your words change the world. Tucked inside, a folded paper. Russell opened it, read silently. John's attempted poem, clumsy lines about missing sunrises but being grateful for the chance to see sunsets, about learning to appreciate light because he'd lived in darkness. Russell pressed the paper to his chest. I'm keeping this forever. Elvira received her art supplies with characteristic calm, examining each item, testing pencil weight, checking paint quality. Then she unwrapped the commissioned painting, studied it for a long moment. You got this made for me? I wanted you to have something that showed. John stopped. That showed what I hope we're building, together. Elvira set the painting carefully aside, then, without warning, stood and hugged him. Brief but genuine. Thank you, she whispered, for trying. John's composure shattered. He held her for 3 seconds, long enough to matter, short enough to respect her boundaries, then let go. Rita received her envelope last, opened it to find the donation certificate and the letter, 13 pages, one for each year. She scanned the first page. Rita, year 1. I should have been there when they were born. I should have held them, counted their fingers and toes, watched you become the mother I always knew you'd be. I'm sorry I missed it. Her vision blurred. She looked up at John, who was watching her with absolute vulnerability. Read the rest later, he said quietly. When you're alone. She nodded, tucking the letter away like the treasure it was. Our turn. Kane stood, gesturing to his siblings. They moved as a unit, lifting the large newspaper-wrapped package. Together, they carried it to John. We made this, Russell said. For you. All 3 of us, Elvira added. It took 2 weeks. John's hands shook as he accepted the gift, carefully peeled away the newspaper wrapping, found a frame beneath. Inside, a collage. Kane's first soccer medal, the one from when he was 6, the year John had missed entirely while building his company. Russell's early writing awards, certificates with his name in careful calligraphy. Elvira's artwork, small pieces she'd created over the years, arranged in a spiral pattern. In the center, a photograph. All 4 of them at the youth center showcased John in the background, barely visible, but present, captured in the moment before Russell's breakdown, before everything changed. And underneath, carved into the wooden frame in Elvira's precise lettering, you missed our Decembers. But you came back to build our tomorrows. John stared at it. Read the words once, twice, 3 times. Then, the frame slipped from his hands. He dropped to his knees on the living room floor, collapsing forward, sobs tearing out of him with a force that shook his entire body. Dad? Kane's voice came out uncertain. John couldn't speak, could only cry. 13 years of grief and regret and gratitude pouring out in waves that wouldn't stop. Kane moved first, dropped beside him, wrapping arms around his father's shoulders. Russell followed, pressing against John's side. Elvira knelt in front of him, taking his face in her hands, like she was the parent and he was the child. We love you, she said simply. Even though it's complicated, even though it hurts sometimes, we love you. John pulled all 3 of them close, holding his children for the first time as a father who'd earned the right to be called one. They stayed like that, a knot of limbs and tears and forgiveness, while Rita watched from the couch, her own tears falling freely. She'd built this family alone, raised these extraordinary humans through exhaustion and poverty, and nights when she thought she couldn't survive another day. But watching them embrace their father, seeing the healing happening in real time, she realized, She'd never been building a family of 4. She'd been keeping space for 5. Rita stood, crossed the room, placed her hand on John's back. He looked up at her through tears, face destroyed, and rebuilt simultaneously. The children pulled back slightly, making room. Rita knelt beside them, beside John, beside the family they were becoming. "Stay for breakfast, John," she whispered. His breath caught. "I already ate breakfast." "Then stay for lunch." Her voice grew stronger. "Stay for dinner." "Stay for..." She stopped. "Just stay." Understanding dawned across his face. Not an invitation to move in, not a proposal, just a statement of intention. "You belong here now." "I'm staying," he managed. "I'm not going anywhere." Outside, snow continued falling in soft spirals, the same way it had the night John first appeared on Rita's porch. The same December patterns that had marked 13 years of absence. But this time, the snow wasn't covering wounds. It was witnessing healing. Kane stood first, pulling everyone up. "We should probably stop crying and eat more cinnamon rolls." Russell laughed wetly. "Is that the official Fuller family therapy technique?" "It is now," Elvira declared. They moved as a unit to the kitchen, leaving the living room scattered, with wrapping paper and the framed collage propped against the tree. Rita paused to look at it one more time. The medals and awards and art pieces, evidence of lives lived fully despite absence. And beneath it all, those words. "You missed our Decembers, but you came back to build our tomorrows." John appeared beside her, following her gaze. "I'll spend the rest of my life building tomorrows with them," he said quietly. "With all of you. If you'll let me." Rita took his hand, squeezed once. "Then let's start now." They joined their children in the kitchen, where Kane was already eating a 4th cinnamon roll. Russell was reading his new poetry collection aloud, and Elvira was sketching a still life of the breakfast chaos with remarkable accuracy. Through the window, Briar Ridge disappeared under December snow. Christmas lights blinked on neighboring houses. Cars drove past carrying families to celebrations. And inside Rita's modest home, a father who'd been absent for 13 years sat at a table with the children he'd abandoned and the woman he'd loved and lost, and maybe, eventually might love again. Not perfectly, not without complications, not erasing the years that were gone, but present. Finally, irrevocably present. This December wasn't another wound. It was the beginning of healing. And that's how a family broke and rebuilt itself, one December at a time. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in second chances, if you know someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to come home, share this. Subscribe for more stories that remind us we're all worth fighting for. And leave a comment telling me, what would you have done in Rita's place? I read every single one.